Here are the rules for playing Oligark. Movement. In turn, members use an 8-sided die and 2 6-sided dice to move. If the member gets on the 8-sided die, yellow, he adds 100 G to his expenses and places a barrel on the world map. Green, he adds 100 G to his income. Orange, he moves his pawn to a refugee camp or pays a bribe. Blue, he can move according to the result of his 2 dice or just 1. The member moves his pawn clockwise on the flags according to the number indicated on the 6-sided dice. If the member has a double, he will have to play again. The refugee camp. When a member gets a buoy on his 8-sided die, he has 2 choices. He becomes a refugee and places his pawn on a buoy. His turn is over and all members compile their debts, or the member adds 200 G to his debt to avoid deportation and continues his turn normally. The member who is in the refugee camp when it is his turn to play does not roll the dice. He places his pawn on a country where he has a trade agreement, if he does not have one, on one of the countries he controls. Overruns. When a pawn arrives on a country occupied by another member's pawn, he moves the other member's pawn on a buoy and takes his place. The member who overtakes another member has 2 possibilities. The member who overtakes removes 200 G from his debt, and the overtaken member adds 200 G to his debt. Or, the member who overtakes can seize a card of his choice from the overtaken member. The conquest of a free country. When a member arrives in a free country, he de facto conquers this nation. To do this, he pins a pin of his color on the target at the base of the flag. If the country is occupied by a pin of another color, he simply places his pawn on the country. The actions. A member can exercise in turn to play as many actions as his cards allow him. The cards. You draw a colored card when you arrive in a country marked with a red, blue, or green dot. If the dot is white, you can buy a card for 200 G. The action indicated on the drawn card has priority. The game continues normally after the execution of the specified action. For example, the member does not pay customs if the drawn card allows him to move. The card can also be kept to be played later when specified on it. At this time, the card is no longer a priority. The cards are placed on the table with the text clearly visible. The tax haven cards are placed face down on the table, not readable. When a card has been used, it is moved out of the game, unless otherwise indicated on the card. When there are no more cards left in a pile, reuse the discarded cards. The attacks. A member who arrives on a country that he owns can declare war on a country that is adjacent to him. The loser must remove his pin, that of his trade agreement as well, and pin the winner's pin. The term army corresponds to the number of dice. The battalion is the number indicated on the die. During an attack, normally the offensive member has 3 armies and the defensive member has 2 armies. A member having a trade agreement in a country in conflict adds an army in attack or defense. Both members throw their armies into battle and compare their strongest armies. An army with more battalions eliminates an army with fewer battalions. In the event of a tie, the defensive army wins. The non-entrenched armies are re-rolled until one of the 2 members no longer has an army. The member who still has at least 1 army wins. Example of dice played. In the first round, The army of 6 offensive battalions wins over the 5 defensive battalions. Remove the defender's army of 5 battalions. The army of 4 offensive battalions loses against the army of 4 defensive battalions. Remove the offensive die of 4 battalions. On the second turn, there are now 2 offensive armies and 1 defensive army left. Reroll the remaining dice. The attack continues until a member has no more armies. Customs. A member immobilizing his pawn on the territory of a trade agreement of another member adds 300 G to his debt, and the owning member removes 300 G from his debt. Watch your borders. It is up to the owning member only to claim his customs duty. Customs can no longer be demanded if the member has finished his turn. Attacks take priority over customs payments. A member must not point out that another member is on a territory with a trade agreement. It is up to each member owner to monitor his borders. If a member contravenes this rule, it is up to him to pay customs. Mutual aid, cooperation, except in the case of customs. A member must indicate to another member if he forgets to do any action. Democratic voting. In case of disagreement, voting is used. Any member can request the vote. The proposer must be seconded. The vote is done by show of hands. Members vote according to their interests and do not have to justify their vote. A member can also request the vote for the extension of a game. If the game is extended, there may be a new vote requested for a new extension subsequently. Update of the debt. All members update their debts if a member becomes a refugee, if El Presidente is replaced. To update debts, subtract income from expenses and add the result to the debt. The value of income and expenses must not be changed during this operation. Toxic products. Barrels must be stored on the world map. The storage limit is the last circle of the world map. You must get rid of a barrel when your 8-sided die is yellow, and also add 100 G to your debt. Warning: if barrels become magnetized when the member places his barrel, he keeps his barrel and those that have become magnetized, as well as all those touching the limit. At any time during the game, if a member commits a blunder and barrels become magnetized, this member adds these barrels to his inventory. Important: at the end of the game, members will count the number of barrels still in their possession and will add 100 G to their debt for each barrel. Members who no longer have a barrel will remove 100 G from their debt for each barrel on the world map, divided by the number of members who no longer have a barrel. The trade agreement. A member who is on a country that he owns can conclude a trade agreement with another of his countries that is adjacent to him. To do this, the member pins a thumbtack between the 2 flags and adds 100 G to his debt. The elimination of a member. The member who eliminates another member will be able to remove 500 G of his debt at the end of the game. He then takes possession of the eliminated member's headquarters card. The lack of resources. A member who has no more pens and who must use one must take a pen on one of his countries. The country becomes free. If he has a trade agreement on the country, he also loses it. The dismissal. If El Presidente is dismissed, the member who took the action takes his place. This member then becomes El Presidente, and all the members compile their debts. The new president receives a tax haven card as a welcome gift. End of the game and final debt count. When time is up, each member updates his debt one last time. In addition, the member adds to his debt 100G for each barrel still in his possession, 100G for each credit card he still has in hand. The member deducts from his debt. Members who no longer have a barrel remove 100G from their debt for each barrel that are on the world map, the whole divided by the number of members who no longer have a barrel. 500G for the elimination of a member. 1000G if he owns the country of his headquarters. 100G for each pin of his color on the game board. The total value of his secret accounts in tax havens. The member with the least debts wins the game.